When was the last time you sat down to write systems, processes, or standard operating procedures and actually enjoyed it? I mean, truly enjoyed it. Not because you had to do it, not because your consultant told you to, not because your operations person kept asking for it, but because you genuinely look forward to it. Here's another question. If you actually sat down and documented every important process in your business, how long would it take? Weeks? Months? Would you feel energized by the process or would you procrastinate it for as long as possible? And one more question. How long did it take for your systems to become outdated once you finished writing them? A few months? A few weeks? Sometimes a few days? If these questions hit a nerve, stick around because I have some good news for you. In this episode, we're going to explore why systems alone do not build self-sustaining businesses. We're also going to talk about an important shift founders need to make mentally, psychologically, and structurally if they truly want to build organizations that can grow beyond them. And towards the end, I'll share with you a simple conversation you can have with your team this week that can begin reducing founder dependency in your business because the goal is not merely to build a more efficient business. The goal is to build a living organization that can think, adapt, and thrive without constantly pulling its founder back into the center of everything. And if you do this right, something interesting begins to happen. Systems stop becoming bureaucratic exercises that people resist and start becoming a part of a living culture that the organization itself helps sustain. This is the Business Philosopher Within You podcast. I'm your host, Bhavesh Naik. And a quick thank you to you, our listener. Hey, listen, this podcast isn't about me teaching you what to think. It's about helping you become your own best business philosopher. That's why I always encourage you to challenge these ideas, test them in the real world, ask questions, and share your perspectives. If something in this episode resonates with you, leave a comment and join the conversation. Thank you for tuning in. Before we go any further, I want to be very clear about something. Systems matter. Processes matter. Operational structure matters. In fact, businesses without systems usually become chaotic, reactive, and exhausting. Systems create consistency. They reduce unnecessary decision making. They allow knowledge to be transferred. They help businesses scale, create predictability, and reduce operational friction. They make onboarding easier, improve quality control, and help teams coordinate with each other. And perhaps most importantly, they allow businesses to become operationally efficient. This is why operational frameworks like EOS and other system-driven methodologies have helped many companies tremendously because they solve real problems. Without systems, businesses often become dependent on memory, improvisation, heroics, and constant firefighting. And that is not scalable. So this episode is not anti-systems, not even close. Systems are valuable, necessary even. But here's the problem. Even after installing systems, many founders still remain the bottleneck. The business still depends on them emotionally, psychologically, operationally, and structurally. And that's the part system alone do not solve. Now we get to the uncomfortable part. Why is it that so many founders resist system building in the first place? Why does it feel heavy? Why does it feel draining? Why do so many systems eventually become outdated? I think subconsciously we already know something important. We're trying to impose a static structure onto something that's alive. A business is not a machine. A business is a living human system. It shifts, it evolves, people grow, relationships, markets, customers, they change. Reality changes, but systems by nature are static snapshots. And subconsciously we know this. This is why creating systems can sometimes feel lifeless. Because as dynamic human beings, we are trying to freeze something that is constantly moving. And the moment we finish documenting it, reality has already shifted again. Now, this does not mean systems are useless. It simply means systems solve a different problem than founder dependency. Systems help operational efficiency, but operational efficiency is not the same thing as organizational independence. That distinction is critical because many founders think if I just build enough systems, eventually the business won't need me. But often the opposite happens. The systems become dependent on the founder too. The founder becomes the interpreter, the enforcer, the exception handler. the escalation point, the emotional stabilizer, the final decision maker. So the organization becomes systemized, but still psychologically and structurally dependent. There's another question we need to ask. Are your systems helping your people think or preventing them from thinking? Because those are two very different things. When most founders build systems, they're trying to create consistency. That's a good thing. But sometimes, without realizing it, we create systems that require people to stop thinking and simply follow instructions. And that's where the trouble begins. Think about what we hire people for. We hire them because they can exercise judgment, because they can solve problems, think independently, and adapt when reality changes. In other words, we hire them for their natural intelligence. Then we hand them a process and tell them not to deviate from it. At that point, we're taking the very capability we hired them for and asking them not to use it. We're taking natural intelligence and asking it to behave like artificial intelligence. Now, to be fair, constraints are not bad. Every creative discipline has constraints. A painter has a canvas. A musician has an instrument. A sculptor has a stone. Constraints often make creativity possible. The question is not whether your organization should have constraints. The question is whether your systems create the right constraints. Do they help people think better? Or do they eliminate the need to think? Because if your systems require people to stop thinking, eventually every unusual situation gets escalated upward. And guess where it ends up? Back on the founder's desk. Founder dependency is not merely a systems problem, and it's not merely a psychological problem either. It's a structural problem. Yes, there is a psychological component. Many founders deeply identify with the business. The business becomes an extension of themselves, and because of that, they struggle to let go. But even when founders emotionally want to let go, many organizations still cannot function independently. Why? Because the organization itself was architected around dependency. The structure reinforces it. The culture, the decision-making, the communication patterns reinforce it. The people themselves may not feel empowered to think independently. So this is not solved merely by therapy. And it's not solved merely by SOPs. The solution is structural, which means we must begin designing organizations differently, not merely around compliance, but around human capability, not merely around control, but around empowerment, not merely around static procedures, but around living principles. This is where business philosophy comes in. A philosophy is not a rigid script. It is a set of living principles that continue working even when reality changes underneath. A strong business philosophy allows people to think, to adapt, to interpret, to make decisions, to navigate ambiguity without constantly escalating everything upward. And this philosophy cannot merely be copied from someone else. It must become your own. Just like you customize systems to your business, you must also customize the philosophical foundation of your organization. Hopefully, not just by yourself, but collectively with your people. So, what do we actually do with this? Here's a practical starting point, Mr. Founder, Madam Founder. Sit down this week with one of your direct reports, not for a performance review, not for operational updates, not for status reports. Sit down with them as another human being and ask them this question. What is one thing you normally bring to me for approval that you believe you could decide yourself? Then ask this. What's stopping you? That question alone can reveal enormous structural dependency inside an organization. You can also ask, what are your people bringing to you that they could eventually learn to handle themselves? Because founder dependency usually cascades downward through the organization, and the goal is not reckless autonomy. The goal is thoughtful empowerment. The goal is to help people think, to build judgment, to develop confidence, to create an organization that gradually becomes more self-activating. One decision at a time, one conversation at a time, one layer at a time. If this episode resonates with you, I want to invite you to take the next step. I've created something called the Founder Dependency Snapshot. It's a diagnostic tool designed to help you identify where dependency actually exists inside your organization, operationally, structurally, psychologically, and culturally. Because most founders already know they are the bottleneck. The real question is, where exactly is the dependency embedded in the organization? I'll include the link in the show notes and in the video description. Founder dependency is not just the business depending on the founder. There's often a flip side to this phenomenon. The founder is also psychologically dependent on the business. There's a codependency that forms between the identity of the founder and the identity of the organization. And unless that relationship changes, true organizational independence becomes almost impossible. We'll explore that in the next episode. But before we do, there are two ideas that sit underneath everything that we've discussed today. The first is that to build a truly self-sustaining organization, you need to become your own best business philosopher. The second is that the humanness of the people, the humanness of your people, is the true life of your business. I've published 2 solo episodes exploring these ideas in depth. I'll link both of them in the description and in the show notes below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.